Okay.
There it is. Bagels. That's the sheet on bagels, right?
Oh, we have to recognize that there's a change in the bagel process. It used to be boiled. Now modern, they're not boiled, they're steamed instead of actually boiled. The process is changing.
I am a 1000% Rabbi Kallus knows exactly how bagels are made. I wouldn't be surprised if he has a little machine in his house which makes bagels. I wouldn't be surprised. They could do a 3D printer.
I'm from Flatbush. I know how bagels are made.
That does I. Good.
I also know how bagels are eaten.
Okay, let's go to work here.
Let's get to work. I hope, please, everybody, daven and pray to Hashem. My internet fell, and daven to Hashem for my internet.
We will, and the Rav should please do the full shir, even though we're starting a few minutes late. Okay.
Okay, but as is Hashem, let's get to
we'll
work.
You my man,
we'll
want
learn today. Il Nishmas, one of our chaverim, Parsha Kapel, is sitting shiva. So we're learning.
Who's sitting shiva? Who's sitting shiva?
One of our chaverim, one of our.
What's the name? I'm saying, what's the name of the Il Nishmas?
Fega Bas Yitzchak Isaac.
The shir is Il Nishmas Fega Bas Rabbi Yitzchak Isaac. Correct?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Let's get to work, Rabbi Isai. I would say that Siman Kuf Samachas Sif Yud Gimel. It is somewhat of a difficult sif. I think of the sifim that we've learned till now, it does on the level of 1 to 10 in difficulty. It could be it's a 35. So let's try Bezos Hashem. I'll try to be Masader. I'm going to try to be Masader before we get to, obviously, what we're trying to get to is donuts.
Okay, let's put on your Gimel. I know the Reb talks fast, but Mordechai, let's at least put your Gimel on the screen so when he starts giving the pieces here, we'll know something what we're staring at. Okay.
I'm going to do whatever I can to try and make our life easy and to try to understand what's going on here, what's it based upon. The starting point over here is that the Shulchan Aruch assumes that even though you're in Orach Chaim, you've learned all the way through Yeridea, all the way to Siman Shin Chav Tes in Yeridea, which is Hilchos Challah. And this is something that we're going to have a little bit of background. I'll do whatever I can to try to help that background, Bezos Hashem. And let's say there's a machlokes, even if there's one Rabbeinu Tam that we're dealing with here, if there's two Rabbeinu Tams that we're dealing with here, and all these things require a lot of Hezber and Bezos Hashem, the Shulchan Aruch and Sifri Gimel, what the sugya is of Daf Lamed Zayin, the Tosafos, it's actually the opposite sugya of what we were dealing with in the previous shir. In the previous shir in Sif Yud, we were dealing with at what point when you have bread, does the shame of the bread get removed? At what point do you lose the shame bread? That's what we were dealing with in the last year. Bishul, does Bishul take away? Does it take away if it's a kazayas? Does it take away if less than a kazayas? What happens if you break it up into little bits? What happens if you do tig into it? That's the sugya of when there is bread. At what point could you remove the shame bread? Our sugya is the exact opposite. Our sugya is, at what point does it get the shame bread, or perhaps as a result of a process, lose the ability to become bread? Not that we have bread and we're removing the shame bread, but we're doing the opposite. We haven't yet achieved bread. And at what point can I say, no, this is called it's going to be bread? Or do I say, no, you did some form of a process which makes it that it's mufka from bread. And then there'll be a shaila and sif yudal, can I bring back the shame bread? So this is going to be tali in Hilchos Challah. It's going to be tali in our sugya and Hilchos Brachos. And like I said before, the Shulchan Aruch assumes that you know Hilchos Challah. Another difficulty, I would say, over here is that we are going al Seder HaGemara, and we're not going al Seder Shulchan Aruch, which makes it that the Shulchan Aruch assumes that by now you know what's going on in Sivav, Zayin, Ches, the sugyas of Pasa Babakisnin, which are the sugyas of being Koveya Suda on a baked Mezainis product, the Chadaima. And then he's going to have a comparison within our sugya of Sif Yud Gimel to klalim that we've learned already in Vav Zayin Ches. And that's Hashem. What's necessary, I'll try to give over. But as we know, there are three levels. There's a level of Hamoitzi. Excuse me, the level of Hamoitzi, a food that can become Hamoitzi. There's a level of Mezainis that I can be Kaves Sudan. And then there's going to be a level of a Mezainis that no matter what I do, it will always remain a Mezainis. And our sugya is where you have a a type of an item, which it's complicated. Is it a tavshil? Kloimar, it's a mezainis product which could never become a moitzi no matter how much you eat. For example, what will be if I eat 20 such donuts? When I get out of the hospital, would I have to bench? That would be one idea. Or no, something that is in our study, we'll see something that is perhaps kneaded and formed into a dough and then cooked. It could be that no matter how much you eat of it, you'd have to make a mezainis. Or no, maybe the opposite. Maybe it's something that would be a moitzi. And we're trying to figure out where this fits. That's the basic framework. The sugyas of challah, brachos, are they connected? That'll be shaila number one. And even when I gave the marmakaimis, I sort of tried to break it down to the oilam in that type of a fashion. Shaila number one is going to be, is that is the din of Hilchos brachos totally in Hilchos challah? We know that Hilchos challah, which is a serious shaila, at least certainly in the times of Chazal, was deraisa. In Eretz Yisrael, it's a very strong derabanan. Kallus chutzlars perhaps is not as strong. But al kapanim, we know that there's a major sugya of challah. We also know that Rabbi Kallus wrote a sefer about challah. And in that sugya of challah, at what point do you have to take challah? Now that's clear that on something that's a tavshil, something that is a cooked mezainis product, you're not going to have to take challah on. And that's also clear that on bread, you have to take challah. And as a matter of fact, which is just as clear, but maybe not as known, on cake, you also have to take challah. The only reason why most people don't take challah on cake is simply because the amounts that they are eating, the shear doesn't warrant taking challah. That's the only reason why. But generally, if you would have enough cake, you'd have to take challah even on cake. Our shaila is that, so what's the din? Before we begin, the specific din of a baked, of a dough that you're going to cook. In general, the rules of challah, listen closely, because this is where even the Rishonim have confusion. I'm going to go today with the Mahalach of the Be'alacha and the Shabura, but there's two separate shailas. Shaila number one is, are the dinim of Hilchos brachos tali in the dinim of challah? Kloimar, if I say that something has to have challah taken from it, does that automatically tell us, so then therefore that product could become a hamoitzi product? Or no, even if Hilchos challah would be one way, not necessarily in Hilchos brachos is going to have the same rules. Now I'm talking a bit theoretical. In a moment, it'll be very clear, but that's the ideal. The rules of Hilchos challah connected to brachos, whatever it'll be by challah, I'll have to know for brachos. The shita of Rabbeinu Yoina in brachos daf chav zayin amid aleph, Rabbeinu Yeruchim says it's not toli zeh bazeh, and even if I will have something that perhaps the mitzad Hilchos challah, I would have said perhaps that you're pater chayiv, but in Hilchos brachos, I want to know one thing: what's going on at shas afiyah? I want to know what's going on at the point of when you're cooking it and when you're baking it. If you're cooking it, then no matter what, it'll be a mezainis and remain a mezainis. Because Hilchos challah and Hilchos brachos aren't tali zebazeh. Hilchos challah is going to be tali in the kneading process, in the dough. Afrashas challah min isa. So when there's an isa, it could be over there that I don't have to necessarily look at the end product, at the baking shlav, at the time of the baking. And once I did a kneading process, perhaps the kneading process alone might be mechayiv Hilchos challah. That does not mean that if afterward I take this item which was kneaded and therefore you took challah from it, it could be if I do some process afterward, which is not a baking process, I'll do some type of a cooking process to it. It could be, even though there'll be shitas that require challah on this, but the bracha will be a mezainis, and not only will it be a mezainis, it'll be an alamichya. Kloimar, it'll be mufka from the shame pas. This is the shita of Rabbeinu Yoina. Dr. Rabbeinu Yoina, I'll read it today. I'm going to go very slow in the beginning, just to make sure all the shitas are clear. Rabbeinu Yoina says, "V'nira l'moiri HaRav yesh la."
Put out there, Rabbeinu Yoina, please. Page 1.
Brachos chav zayin amud aleph.
There we go.
Yesh lahamid chilek hadavar be'inyan shim haisa belila ava mitchila. V'achar kach richecha oisaya de mashke chayev challah. It could be you started out with a gibel, with a belila ava, with a thick batter. which requires challah. Once it was already chayiv challah, there was one point where you needed the dough and you made a dough, it was already chayiv challah. Hachiyav challah tali bagilgul. Doesn't mean the gilgul, the previous gilgul. It means challah is tali in the dough form. Aval ein mevarchin hamoitzi, because birchas hamoitzi is tali in the shem lechem. In order to get a shem lechem, you need to have an afiyah process. And kevachin is battle from Taurus lechem. If you went and cooked it, that doesn't have a shem lechem. So this is so important, Rabbi Isai.
Where does it say you cooked it? Where does it say you cooked it? Where does it say you cooked it?
He's coming off that you did something to be mafkir the shem lechem. He's going on the sugya.
What did you do?
So it's what we call in the Mishnah is sivgainen. Sivgainen. Sivgainen is doing some type of a liquefying process to a dough. What that process is, the Mitzvah Shem will discuss. But in the simple form, I'm going to use the donut case as our framework for this sugya, because that's really, in essence, a very, very, very part and parcel of the sugya. It's you're making a dough, and then afterward, you're going to either deep fry it or cook it. But right now, just for the extremity, you're taking a dough, and then after you're cooking it. That's clear what the Paiskim B'Shainim we're all discussing over here, based on that Mishnah, which I'm going to get clear in Mitzvah Shem. It'll be clear, much more clear in a moment. But that's, if you want to see the words explicit, Rabbeinu Yerucham in the Nesiv Tezayin in Chelakei Kuf Memei, I just didn't say it because I don't know if the Olam has it. He brings those words mamish. He says, even though it's a Chiyav Chala, but he says, Ein holchin b'moitzi ela shas afia uloilem soifai sivgainin ein mevarchen amoitzi vim soifai itza kloimar nefes v'loi bishul. If you baked it and didn't cook it b'mayim v'loi tiggin, then it's a moitzi. But if you cook it, the bracha is always going to be a mezainis and remain a mezainis. Now, Baisai, as we mesader, that means, listen closely, that means according to Rabbeinu Yoina, all the shilas, well, except for the bagel shilas, Sif Yudal, a whole different shilah, kimat all the shilas we're going to start today in Hilchos Brachos, we're going to mention today, do not start. They are vade mezainis, ala michias. You can eat 32,000 donuts, and it will be, after you get out of the hospital, you're still going to only make an ala michia. And the reason is because the Hilchos Brachos has nothing to do with Kallus. The Rabbeinu Yoina, he made our day easy and we could go home early. According to Rabbeinu Yoina, you do not need to learn Hilchos Chala before you learn Hilchos Brachos. He does. I don't care what it says in Hilchos Chala. In Hilchos Chala in Akanami, it could be that once you need a dough, you already have to make. You have to do a fresh challah, whatever. Very nice. Sugi, I want to know one thing: did you take the dough and cook it in water? If you did, it's game over. What are you talking about? Last week, we gave a whole shiur about cooking bread and dough, cooking bread and water. And when you cook a kazayis, it doesn't take away the shem hamaiti. The answer is pashit. The answer there we were discussing when you have bread to be mafkia the shem bread. So you can't be mafkia the shem bread by cooking if it's already kazayis. Over here, we're discussing the opposite. We're discussing it never got the shem bread. So the shas of bread is hukva kefi when you bake it. So if you didn't bake it and you cook it, it never got a shem of bread. According to Rabbeinu Yoina, Rabbi say, we can go home early. According to Rabbeinu Yoina, it's over. On every case we're going to talk about, it's mezainis simply because it never got the shem bread. Kumt Rabbeinu Tam in Brachos Lamed Zayin Rebeis Dibra Maskal Lechem. That's our sugya. In Psalchim Lamed Zayin Rebeis. This one Rabbeinu Tam in every Masechta Lamed Zayin Rebeis Dibra Maskal the Chule. The Torah in Sivav brings down this Rabbeinu Tam. The shita of Rabbeinu Tam is no. You can't go home early. You have to know Hilchos Chala. And whatever the rules are of Hilchos Chala, those are the rules also over here in Hilchos Brachos. And therefore, if in Hilchos Chala, it's Chayiv and Chala, then in Hilchos Brachos, it'll be a Mezainis, but it could certainly turn into a Amaitzi. But it's definitely totally in Hilchos Chala. Why? You understand that might be a little bit more of a complicated Indian to figure out what's the reason why. I mean, the Rabbeinu Yoina makes a lot of sense. Shasafia, the shem lechem, is hamoitzi lechem in our. It's what's called lechem. You need to have baking process. But lemaisa, the lechem of the Torah is totally in challah, and therefore the Rabbeinu Tam shita is you need to know Hilchos Chala in order to learn our sugya. So the starting point of our sugya when I take a dough and then afterward I'm going to cook the dough, what's the din of a dough that I cook? According to Rabbeinu Tam, that thing could be a moitzi. As a matter of fact, that thing is a moitzi. If it was chayiv and chala, then it's a moitzi. That Rabbi Yisai is machlekes number one. Machlekes number one. Machlekes number two is basically, how do you learn a Mishnah? In Chala, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Hey. This is the Mishnayist year for the day, Rabbi Yisai. Mishnah, Chala, Perek Aleph, Mishnah Hey. You probably feel like you're taking off your tefillin. The Mishnah says, Isa, Shetchilaza, Sufkinin, V'Seifa Sufkinin, Patim in a Chala. Says that if it started a Sufkinin and it ended a Sufkinin, it's Patim from Chala. What's a Sufkinin? Tchila here, Rabbi Yisai, means the Gilgal, means the kneading process. Saifai means the afia process, the end, the baking, cooking process. Sufkinin means a soft batter, some type of a loose batter, and or it could also mean a cooked product, a product that was being cooked from the beginning, something to do with wetness. And Isa is, of course, thickness, is reference to a thickness. With this in mind, let's read the Mishnah. Isa, which is tchila sufkinin, some type of loose batter, v'saifai sufkinin, and something to do with a cooking process in the end. That's patim in a chala. But tchilas isasa v'saifai sufkinin, if it's thick in the beginning, which is what we call kneading, a thick batter, and saifai sufkinin, and in the end you cook it. Or tchila sufkinin, or in the beginning it started out a loose batter, and then in the end, through the baking process, it became thick and it became much more, certainly not loose. Chayiv b'chala. That's the basic framework. Now, what's the pshat in this Mishnah? What's the pshat? The seeming pashut words in the Mishnah are, well, if it's loose batter and it ends loose, patav and chala, that doesn't get the shame bread. Mashen Kain, if it's at any shlav that there was a certain texture strengthening, a thick batter, we'll call it. So then such a case is going to be a hamoitzi, even if the end result is a loose batter, a cooking process. I want to know at one point was there dough. That's what I want to know. Or the other way, even if I started out with a loose batter and I end with a baking process, so then I could also get the shame chala. Again, now we're in Hilchos Chala. The only reason we have come to Hilchos Chala is because Rabbeinu Tam told us in the previous sugya, you must know Hilchos Chala because whatever the rules of Hilchos Chala are the rules of Hilchos Brachos. Now in Hilchos Chala, there's going to be a machlokes. When is there going to be a chiyuv chala in the case that we just described? Kloimar. This is a new machlokes. A machlokes, again, Rabbeinu Tam is involved. Rabbeinu Tam and Rambam. Two Rabbeinu Tams. In order to get to the point of a donut being an amoitzi, you're going to have to get through two Rabbeinu Tams. Let's explain. The Rambam learns pshat in this Mishnah that everything, and this is also the sheet of the Rash, everything is tali in kavana. And I'll read you the Rambam in Hilchos Bikurim, Perek Vav, Alachid Yud Beis, Yud Gimel. The Rambam says, the way he learns the Mishnah is that in Isa, Shelosha Tchila Lasois, a Maisachama. If your original thought process was that you want to, take this dough and do some weird baking process to it, or hischala lefos pas, v'shlima ma'isachama, v'kein keli shaloshu lafoisei pas, chayiv b'chala. A little bit easier is the Rash. Tchilas isa v'soifei sufkenim, pamim adam lash isa v'nimlach, the oisa sufkinin. The shita, which this is gepaskined in Yoredeya by the Shulchan Aruch in Shincha Tesiv Gimel. This I'll read and then I'll explain. Isa sheblila ava is the shita of the Shulchan Aruch. And Isa, which is a thick batter, and he was megalgalit al das to cook. I took dough, and my intention originally was to cook. I knew that. Then it's pater from chala. And that is how you read the Mishnah. Isa shetchila sufkinin, v'saifa sufkinin, patim nechala, but tchilas isa v'saifa sufkinin, or tchilas sufkinin v'saifa isa chai v'chala, is going not on our case that we were discussing by the donut case. Kloimar, our case of where a person knows that from the beginning he's making a dough, and that dough he plans on cooking, says the Rambam and the Rash, that is potter from challah. If you know from the beginning, then you're potter from challah. Gilgal al das levashla, potter. But if you originally planned on making bread with this dough, so it starts out dough, and you plan on making bread, and you change your mind, nimlach, and then you change your mind, and you cooked it, then we say you're chayiv in challah. Why? Says the Shulchan Aruch, shekfarnes chayiv in challah. It already got the chalois shem challah. Depends on what you plan on doing at the time when you make the dough. If at the time when I make the dough, I plan on cooking it, not chayiv in challah. If when I plan on baking it, so then even if you change your mind, it doesn't matter, because it already was chal the shem chi of challah at the point of when you needed it with the intention of taking this item, and you had das that you're going to bake it. But so if you didn't bake it, doesn't matter. We want to know, what were you thinking when you made the dough? If you learn like this, it's another reason why the sugya of today does not start. Most of the cases that we're going to deal with are going to be doughs that you make with the das to cook. So according to the Rambam and the Rash, if you made a dough with the das to cook, the shas of the kneading, the shas of the making of the dough was al das to do something which will take away the shame bread. It doesn't get a shame amoitzi. And like we keep on saying, if you eat 30 of them, when you get out of the hospital, you won't have to bench. Kum Rabbeinu Tam. And the Biur Halacha explains us very clearly. This is a different Rabbeinu Tam. Kum Rabbeinu Tam in Brachos Lamed Zayin Rebeis, nonetheless, in Taisus de Bramaskal Lechem. And he says a second chiddush. He's cholik on the Rambam. And he says, no. Everything is tali in what was basoif. If basoif, doesn't matter what it was, b'shasa isa. If basoif, you actually made it into, excuse me, I should saying it wrong. Not basoif. Everything is tali in what it originally was. If when you made the isa, even though your intention was to cook it, and you actually cooked it, but since you made a dough is chayiv in challah, and a dough that's chayiv in challah is also klape Hilchos Brachos, going to be the same rules. A dough is chayiv in challah, even if, as long as it's a thick dough, as long as it's a thick batter, a dough is chayiv in challah, even if by sight you intend on cooking it. Everything is tali with the tzura sa'isa if there's an isa. So Rabbi say, it means like this. In order to start our sugya today, you have to get, and this Rabbi say, klape this shaila, actually, well, before we get to our sugya today, klape this shaila right here, what's the psak halacha on this shaila, which also should make our day quite easy. What's the psak halacha on a dough that you make with the intention of cooking? The Rambam's shita is potter from challah. The Rabbeinu Tam's shita is chayiv in challah, because we look at the isa. The Rambam says, no, we look at your intention. This is gepaskind in Mechaber Yeridei Shin Chav Tesif Gimel, like the Rambam. So we should again go home early, because according to the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch, it's not chayiv in challah. If you made a dough with the intention of cooking, not chayiv in challah. So certainly brachos is not going to be any better. The Aruch HaShulchan in Yeridei Shin Chav Tesif Tesvav says Vekein HaMinig. The minig is like that on dough that you plan on cooking, not chayiv in challah. Habay said, if it's not chayiv in challah, it definitely doesn't have a shem lechem. If it doesn't have a shem lechem, you're vaday not making a brachos hamazon on it. Kommt the Shach, the Rebbe, the Heilige Koyin Shach, in Yeridei Shin Chav Tesif Dalid, and he says, look, Harbe Paiskim, he means Rabbeinu Tam. They're
Put up the Yeridei.
And they say, if it's a thick blila, even if you did it al das to cook, chayiv in challah, because it's all totally in the shas hagilgal. And he says, and that's what it's brought in the Beis Yosef. He says, lachein yesh lahachmir. The Heilige Shach says you should be machmir to take challah. And right now, for lack of a better example, from donuts, but without a bracha. So if somebody tells you that he's taking challah from donuts with a bracha, you better find out what type of donuts he's making, because the conventional type is a dough that you plan on cooking, and we'll see exactly what type of cooking, but it's a dough, and the Shach says you take challah without a bracha. That is l'maisa what we do. That's what all the kashrus organizations do also. They take challah without a bracha, even though the Aruch HaShulchan says that the minhag is to just be makel straight up. I do not think that today that's the minhag, but I'll upon him, and certainly certainly it's not the mekubal. You take challah without a bracha. So now Rabbi said, let's make a sikum so that we can start Shulchan Aruch, and then we'll start with all the problems that come now. So now if I ask somebody, what's the halacha if you have a dough that you're going to cook? What's the halacha? Is such a thing of a zaynis that could turn into a moitzi? Or excuse me, is such a thing a moitzi, which is a birchas hamazon? Or is such a thing, it's just pashut mezainis, and you could eat 1,000 of them and it won't turn into a birchas hamazon. So you'll say like this, okay, look, we know already what the Shulchan Aruch is probably going to say, because even in Hilchos Challah, he told us that it's pater and challah. So we know what's going to probably happen. The Shulchan Aruch will probably tell us it's pater and challah. So certainly it's going to be not chayiv, it can't be birchas hamazon. And even if you want to say, I don't go like the Shulchan Aruch because the Shach is machmir in Hilchos Challah. Maybe the Shach was machmir in Hilchos Challah when it came to a shaila of challah, which is a serious shaila deraisa, mashagim by Brachos. So maybe we should say, there's lots of sveikas here. What are the sveikas? And now we'll go in order. Safek number one is maybe the shaila doesn't start, because maybe when it comes to Hilchos Brachos, I want to know what's a chasafia regardless, irrespective of if it's chayiv and challah. Even if you're going to tell me it's chayiv and challah, but when it comes to Hilchos Brachos, I'll tell you the Hilchos Brachos is totally in the words hamoitzi lechem min haaretz. You can't call this thing lechem. Challah is totally in the isa, so there could be a tzad that maybe by challah it has to do with the shasa hagilgal. But Mashen Kain and Brachos, one straight, very strong svara is the svara, like we started with the Rabbeinu Yaina, that in Hilchos Brachos is not going to be a mezainis. Number two, even if you're going to tell me that Hilchos Brachos is totally in Hilchos Challah, but Hilchos Challah there's a very strong side, which is the psak of Shulchan Aruch, that the isa that afterward you cook is pater in challah, like the Rambam, that we look at your kavanah. If you knew originally you're going to be cooking it, so then such a thing is pater from challah. So therefore, I think anybody opening Shulchan Aruch would have expected to see that when you're dealing with a dough that you're going to cook, I think everyone would expect to see that over here we're going to say the bracha is mezainis and ala michya, no matter how much you eat. Come to Shulchan Aruch with unbelievable chiddush. Come to Shulchan Aruch. Afilu davar kuf samachet yud gimel afilu davar shebli lasai aveh in bishlei tigna ein mevarich lav hamaitzi. So far, so good. Even if it has a Teresa de Nahama. Afilu din eschayiv b'chala. Very good. Who's that? Oh, that's Rabbeinu Yaina. Who cares that it's chayiv and chala? Saif. Huh? It's a brother not totally in the same rules. Because the birchas hamaitzi ein a heilich ela acha shasafiyah. So the Shulchan Aruch is gewaldig. He just told us that we don't even have to start the whole thing. We don't have to get into Hilchos Challah. The rules of Hilchos Challah are in Hilchos Challah. The rules of Hilchos Brachos are by us. So whatever it is in Challah, I don't care about. By Brachos, it's totally in Lechem. It doesn't have a shame Lechem. But then bring to Shulchan Aruch, v'yesh cholkim, who's yesh cholkim? Rabbeinu Tam. Which Rabbeinu Tam? L'choira, and this is how the Mishabura seems to learn. He says, v'oimrim the kol shetchilas isa aveh. First of all, you have to know, number one, there's two Rabbeinu Tams here. Number one, Rabbeinu Tam, that the laws of Brachos are totally in Challah. Number one. Number two, a second Rabbeinu Tam, that fine, the laws of Brachos are totally in Challah, but also that in Hilchos Challah, Rabbeinu Tam held that such a case is chayiv in Challah, because everything depends on if you did a Gilgal, you're chayiv in Challah. That's the words in Shulchan Aruch. Yesh cholkim v'oimrim the kol shetchilas isa aveh. Afilu afterward, you soften it in water, you cook it up. Asa sufkinin bishla b'mayim, you make a moitzi. Kum to Ramah, v'nagu lahakel. The minig is lahakel, and the minig is like the first shita kloimar. I guess kula over here means not having to make a long arichas stick benching. So therefore, the minig is what mezainis ala mechya, no matter how much you eat. Kum to Shulchan Aruch weiter. And he says, mamish, a startling statement, startling. He says, Ayir Shemayim. Shlomo Zalman used to say, who's the Ayir Shemayim? So the Shlomo Zalman used to say, if the Shulchan Aruch says Ayir Shemayim, it's very rare. He says one in Reish Ches we saw. He says over here, if the Shulchan Aruch says Ayir Shemayim, means Davzayin Ayir Shemayim. You have to be Ayir Shemayim. In this case, everyone's Ayir Shemayim. Says the Shulchan Aruch Ayir Shemayim, Yatzi Dei Shneim, and don't eat it. Elim Kain, make the bracha moitzi on something else. So this is an unbelievable chiddush, Rabbi Say. Unbelievable chiddush. Over here, the Shulchan Aruch is hatla fefella. What did Shulchan Aruch say? If you would ask the Shulchan Aruch, even in Hilchos Chala, he was mekel, and he held it's not chayv in Chala. When you're dealing with a dough that afterwards you plan on cooking, even in Hilchos Chala, you're pater from such a thing. Here, the Shulchan Aruch is an unbelievable chumrah, unbelievable Ayir Shemayim. Sorry, because number one, maybe the rules aren't totally in Chala, and therefore pashut you would make a mezainis. Number two, in Hilchos Chala, you yourself Shulchan Aruch don't even bring the Rabbeinu Tam. The Shach brings the Rabbeinu Tam. You yourself Shulchan Aruch hold in Hilchos Chala that you're pater from Chala, and therefore over here, even if the rules are totally, but it should be pater from Chala. And still, the Ayir Shemayim level of the Shulchan Aruch required that no, two reasons to be mekel. And Afal Pikein, Ayir Shemayim is machman. You know what? The Ramah just says the minig, he said the words v'nagel lahakol before Ayir Shemayim. He's coming to tell us, even I agree that you should know the minig is lahakol, and even the Shulchan Aruch holds the minig is lahakol, because you see from the Shulchan Aruch brings a stam and a yesh cholkim. But Afal Pikein, the Ramah is not arguing on the next line, v'yir Shemayim. Otherwise, he would have said v'yir Shemayim paters it v'nagel lahakol. It doesn't say that. He's masking. It seems to be that, everyone should try to be over here in Ayir Shemayim. So this, Rabbi is saying, is part one, and the Mishnah Berurah, excuse me, in Sivkat and Ayin. He said, and very interesting over here, the Mishnah Berurah, it's mashma. I told you that it's totally if you planned it. Mishnah Berurah is mashma, an unbelievable, a bigger chiddush. Mishnah Berurah's mashma knows whether it's nimlach, and therefore there's only one Rabbeinu Tam, or like we said, the Mishnah Berurah Shulchan Aruch is mashma, even if it wasn't nimlach, even if he planned it and it's two Rabbeinu Tams, it seems to still say that we paskin that you should try to be machmir in this case. Now I want to just point out one thing. I saw the Or L'Tzion in Chelik Beis, in Parakid Beis, at the end of HaRav and HaRav. He asks the kasha. He says, "What happened to the steer in Shulchan Aruch? It's a steer in the Mechaber. The Shulchan Aruch in Hilchos Chala, Taka says Yechayiv Yepater Chala. So by us, why is he being chayshish for not only it's a double Rabbeinu Tam? Why is he being chayshish by us that if you plan on cooking dough, then you have to maybe worry that it's a moitzi? You don't even mechayiv it in Chala. So why would I worry that it's a moitzi? The Shulchan Aruch l'shitasai. Or L'Tzion says you should know from over here that Maran Chazar boy, Maran Beit Yosef was Chayzer, and he was Chayzer, and Yeridea, that it's Taka, not Chayiv and Chala, and therefore Maran himself, if you would ask the Or L'Tzion, he would tell you, Maran would tell you, it's a Mezainis, and that's it. Now, I just want you to realize one thing. The Maran Beit Yosef wrote his Sefer, Beit Yosef, before he wrote the Sefer Shulchan Aruch. Which means if you're making a cheshbon, Maran Beit Yosef had to be chayzer 3 times. Number one, he wrote Beit Yosef by us. He writes that it's Ayir Shemayim is machmir, and he's chayshish for all these chumras, and he's worried that perhaps it is chayiv and kala, and that perhaps it is a hamaitzi. Okay. Then when he got to Yeridei Shin Chav Tes, and Yeridei Shin Chav Tes, it says the same thing as it says in the Beit Yosef. So the Beit Yosef, he was chayzer the first time, and he changed his mind and he said it's not chayiv and chala. Okay, then he wrote the Sefer Shulchan Aruch, Kuf Samech Ches, Sif Yud Gimel Shulchan Aruch, and then he was chayzer back to what he originally held, that it's not so clear to him, and that perhaps it's chayiv and chala. Then he was chayzer a third time when he wrote the Sefer Shulchan Aruch, Yeridei Shin Chav Tes. He was chayzer another time, and that's where he went with the final psak that it's hamaitzi, that it's pater from chala, and that it's mistam also would be a mezainis. That Rabbi is saying is quite dachik. It's quite dachik. And I must admit, I don't really have such a gewaldige teretz. Kanira, because of the sveikis of Hilchos Brachos. The ikar din is that really it is taka pata from challah, and the ikar din is, and that you see even in the Ramah. The ikar din is it's pata from challah, and the ikar din is that you would make him a zaynis and an al michya, and that's it. But a year shemayim is chaychish because Hilchos Brachos, it's very scary. Birchas Hamazon, all these things are quite scary. And this also, very interesting, is kumt the Mishnah Brura in Sivkotin Ayin Hay, and he says, nearly, that let's say you got filled up, you ate 12 donuts. We'll see in a minute how they make donuts, but assuming that they make donuts by dough, and then afterward cooking it in water, or deep frying or whatever. So let's say now you got really filled. So now this isn't something deraisa. According to the Tzad Lav Rabbeinu Tam, B'chayv B'chas Hamazon. According to the Tzad Rabbeinu Yoina, Yivadei Nat. According to the Rambam, Yivadei Nat. It's not chayv and challah, or the rules of challah are not tali zeh b'zeh, brachos. Come to Mishnah Brura, and he says it's a suffix deraisa. Suffix deraisa. Now the emes is that a little bit of a chiddush over here, because what's the deraisa? If you make an alamichya, I read you the Sharat Tzion over here. If you make an alamichya, you're probably yotzei the deraisa. So regardless, I'm being yotzei the deraisa, and that's the Sharat Tzion over here, and Zivkot Nayin Aleph. He says, "Hamidaraisa mistaber you yotzei with alamichya the Birchas Hamazon." So it's only the Rabbanon. So he says, yeah, but it starts as a shayla on a deraisa. Kevan that you're mechuyev to bench min Torah. Therefore, the suffix memela you're mechuyev to bench all the brachas. So I just want to show you, it's like a very big chiddush over here by side. Number one is that maybe it's not chayiv and challah. Number two is maybe the rules of challah aren't totally anyways in Hilchos Brachos. Number three is if I make an alamichya, I'm anyways yaitz the deraisa, so it's only shal d'Rabbanan and afal pk. Mishnah Brura over here says, unbelievable chiddush. Mishnah Brura says that you would have to bench. I'll read you the lashon in Sifayin Hay. The davka but the loy akol svia, when it's only a d'Rabbanan of a akol svia. If you're filled up, here Birchas Hamazon deraisa, you must bench me suffix. On that, that already. The Mishnah Brura is only machmir if you have both Rabbeinu Tams. Is only machmir if you don't have both Rabbeinu Tams. Kloimar. Here, the Mishnah Brura brings down in Sivkotin Ayin Hay, and he explains it more in Dibra Maskal V'Nagu. He says, Kol zeh shalosh v'asa b'lila ava yadas was lefos. That far, he says, you got to at least have here the Rambam. In other words, it's got to be at least that when I made the dough, my intention was I planned on baking it. But if you have, number one, the Rabbeinu Tam, that you didn't plan on baking it, and number two, Rabbeinu Yaina, that the rules aren't totally zebazah, that's already a sveika. And if you ate a kedei svia, Mishnah Brura says, that far we're not going to make you bench, and that you would only do an al mechis. So the normal case that we're going to have if you get kedei svia is that case, and therefore we would still only say an al mechia. But this abaisai is first of all the basic sugya. And the chayra, if we would stop here and we would think that they make donuts by putting them into water, then it would come out that you would have to make a mezainis and an al mechia, but a year shemayim would not do that, and a year shemayim would eat it only in a suda to get out of the shayla. This is number one. Abakum, the Mishnah Brura over here, and the Taz and Sivkot in Yutes with the new Shaila. Come the Taz in Sivkot, and he says, our whole sugya is only when you bake it and then you cook it in water. He says, but let's say you deep fry it. So now it's true, we saw last time deep frying as a din of cooking, but he says there's something else that's going on when you deep fry it. Don't forget, when you take oil and you take dough and you put it in the oil, inevitably the dough is going to get filled up with the oil, and therefore that's now no longer considered just bread and water. That's considered bread, water, and a nilosh of a fruit juice, kloimar, of not just water. And that gets us into the shaila of Pasa Baba Kisnin. Now I'm going to talk about how they make donuts there in a moment, but let's talk about this donut first. So come to gain the Taz, and he says, Yesh chilik in nilosh b'shemen v'dvash. He says, well, what happens if I fry it up? Now, I must tell you that the Taz doesn't even say deep fry. I added the words deep fry. He says stamazai, if you fry it in oil. So if you fry it in oil, he says here, whoa. Then by the time you get to the thing, what's the difference if I take dough and knead it with oil, which we know at least that won't, maybe you're right, it could be amaitzi, it could be very mezainis and amaitzi. Excuse me. It could be very mezainis and alamechia. And true, if I ate 10 of them, then Pasab Abakisnin might be Kaveh Suda, but it should be totally in the rules of Kviyas Suda. What's the difference if I put the oil in while I was kneading? And what's the difference if I put the oil in after I finished making the dough and then the oil went in? What's the difference? Saif, the dough had oil in it, and then afterward it got cooked up or baked up, etc., etc. So comes the Taz with a gewaltige chap. Kommt the Taz. Kommt the Taz. Mamish a gewaltige chap. He says, you're right. Maybe Taka, when it comes to, if you want to know in theory, if you would take dough and cook it in water afterward, it could be Taka Yer Shemayim. But he says, let's say the way they make donuts, which is the way they make donuts, is that they take a dough and then afterward they fry it in oil. So now, and then afterward, you want to know what's the bracha. So it's true. The dough here, you're right. Maybe it'll be not mufka from the shem lechem. Maybe you would have to take challah from it, but it's not going to be better than a dough that I need in oil. It's not going to be better than any of the cakes that we eat that you nilosh. We know one of the 3 t'nayim to be pasab b'kisnin, this memula, where it has inside of it some type of a filling that takes away the cheshivas of bread until you're kaveh suda, or a cracker, if it's batted down and it's hard to eat, it's crackery, that takes away the cheshivas of bread unless you have too much of it. And there's also nilosh, the other t'nai. If you have a cookie or this, that, which in the cookie is not just water, it's also eggs and oil and all types of zachin. So then you can't, until you're kaveh suda, the bracha is mezainis and alamechia. If you're kaveh suda, then it would change. So now we have a new cheshbon over here that when I eat one donut, I should only have to make a mezainis and then alamechia. Why? Because number one, maybe it's not totally in Hilchos challah. Number two, maybe in Hilchos challah it's not chayiv in challah. Number three, this thing over here in Hilchos Brachos, it can't be better than the regular rules of Hilchos Brachos. And the regular rules of Hilchos Brachos are that such a thing, in order to make a Merchas Hamazon, you'd have to be kaveh suda. This is the cup of the Taz brought in the grass in Sif Kotin Tezayin. Abakum, the Bir Allah and Simfyud Gimel in Dibra Maschel, the Chol Zois. And he says, I read to you. Excuse me. The Chol he says, Hishmatati, I left out the Taz because he says the Taz is making a mistake in Lumdis. What's the pshat in the Taz? Says the Bir Allah, HaRav, we're going our entire chumrah with Rabbeinu Tam. Rabbeinu Tam says, I don't look at the Shas, Afia, Bishul after. I want to know one thing, says Rabbeinu Tam. I want to know what's going on at the Shas HaGilgal. Was there a dough? If there's a dough, then that's it. If there was a thick dough, I only care about that. Says the Mishnah Berurah, so then when I made this dough, before I put it in the oil, that moment already over there, chayiv and challah, once it's chayiv and challah, Brachos Hamazon and whatever, everything. Afterward, you put the oil in. So he says, that's no different than the fact that afterward, I put in a pot. And Kamo that I don't reckon with the pot of after, I also don't reckon with the nilosh. Once it was for one moment, Isa, chayiv and challah, as if to say, once for one moment, I could have theoretically taken this dough and made it into bread. The fact that you did not is not going to take away the shem challah, and the fact that you did not doesn't take away the shem hamoitzi Brachos Hamazon. So Mishnah Berurah seemingly saying that the Taz in Gansen is making a toyus in Lumdis. We're in Rabbeinu Tam. He's right, says the Mishnah Berurah, if you would be going with the other Shita. But we're going in Rabbeinu Tam that reckons with the Shas HaGilgal. As I say, it's almost not going to a kasha on the Taz. So Memelo, according to this, Mishnah Berurah says, therefore, no way. You make a bracha of hamaitzi. You can't make a hamaitzi because it's a suffix, so you must eat it in a meal, even a donut. It's such a bumba shaila on the Taz. What's the answer to the Taz? But here, Abaisai, there's a big kasha on the Mishnah Berurah. Big kasha. Abaisai, if the Mishnah Berurah is right, I have a kasha on all the cakes we eat. If the Mishnah Berurah is right, Abaisai, how do you make a haman tashin? You take dough, regular dough, and then afterwards you fill it up. Okay, today they make the doughs with all types of sugars and whatever. But let's say in the Haim, how do you make a dough? You take a dough, you fill it up with all types of, all the zacha and the mon and the prunes and the fruits and that. That's the t'nai, what's called mamula. So the bracha of that, everybody knows, is a mezainis and an alamechya. At least you eat 30 of them, and then when you eat so many of them, you have to bench and whatever. Okay. Everybody say, wait. Why? According to Rabbeinu Tam, you took a regular dough and then you remale the dough. According to Rabbeinu Tam, according to the way the Mishnah Berurah is looking, we only reckon with Shas, the Gilgal.
Yeah.
We reckon with the Shas of the Gilgal. Another question. Everybody say, what's a cracker? What's a pretzel?
It should be a mitzi. It should be a mitzi.
It should be a mitzi. Rabbi say, what's a cracker? What's a pretzel? What's all the crackers and everything we eat? I'll tell you what it is. It's dough. At one point it was dough. And then you take it and you bat it down. Wait. Rabbeinu Tam stops the clock. He looks at one thing. Shas, there was a Gilgal, and that's it. He doesn't care what you do to it after it. He doesn't care, says the Mishnah Berurah, if you cook it. Says the Mishnah Berurah, he doesn't care if you put oil. So now I'll ask, if he doesn't care if you put oil, he also doesn't care that you batted it down. And by I think it's almost a kavachomer. If you take dough, and it was a dough, and then all you did was bat it down. So then how in the world could that turn into a mezainis? According to Rabbeinu Tam, we should stop the clock and say, it's a dough. It's a dough. Once it's a dough. So that's clearly the tug. That when it comes to other t'noim of Pasuk B'Kisnin, we allow for the future to be mashpia on our decisions right now. So why is this t'nai of Nilosh any different? A bambakasha. So now you begin to understand the Taz. The only thing we heard from Rabbeinu Tam learns the Taz is klape the bishul process. But kol zman, it's a dough. It's all considered dough, according to Rabbeinu Tam, until you cook it the next shlav. So then, if at the point before you're cooking, it doesn't have that chashivas, avada the kloimar, the shlav of what is going to be kaveh suda, even Rabbeinu Tam agrees that we could look at right now. If you want to know that we can only establish is it something that has the chashivas to be kaveh suda on once we get an end product. Even Rabbeinu Tam will agree to that. If the end product is going to be a type of a food which we're not kaveh suda on, so then about that we're not going to say that it's hamoitzi immediately. Haraya crackers, the end product is not chashiv. Haraya hamantashin, the end product. So I'll say haraya a donut. If the end product is going to be a product that is a rangezap that has inside of it all that oil, so then avada we're going to convey the shlav of kfiyas suda is how are we going to establish if it's something that you need to be kfiyas suda on, not at the shlav of the dough. I agree that maybe Hilchos Kallus totally done, and I even agree that maybe Hilchos Brachos could be totally done. But the shear of kfiyas suda should be totally in that shlav. That is the unbelievable chiddush of the Biur Halacha, and the Taz is not willing to accept that. Now, the Biur Halacha has to agree by crackers because there's the mezainis, and it only turns into a berachos hamazon much later on. So he agrees. So I guess you're going to have to be mechalik between a dough that kanira, that's already a part of the cooking process. Kanira is going to be mechalik, and it's going to say that's already a part of the cooking process. And since that's already a part of the cooking process, so then that itself, it was hukva already that the dough is something that is going to be a maitzi type of material. It's a challah type material. But vinishvi, it's an unbelievable chumrah, this Biur Halacha. In other words, in order for a person to say, I have to pater up a donut, he has to get through a tremendous amount of chidushim. Number one, Rabbeinu Yaina. Rabbeinu Yaina says it's not tali zebazeh. Of course, the brachos zala michim mizainis, and no matter how many weeks. Number two, he's got to get through the Rambam. The Rambam tells him even if brachos and challah are tali zebazeh, but challah itself is pater from challah when you're dealing with something that you knew you were going to cook eventually. Number three, even if we'll accept all that, but if you're frying the donut, so then the most you could say is that it could be a mezainis and an alamichya at the first donut. And then afterward, if you eat too many of them, then it'll turn into a shaila. So to go and say that on the first donut, that you have to get now the chiddush of the Biur Halacha against the Taz. And to say that no, Rabbeinu Tam will not look, once it starts the cooking process, Rabbeinu Tam is done. That's it. The second you start the cooking process, I want to know what was at the shlav of the Gilgal. At the shlav of the Gilgal, it was a dough that could be turned into bread. Gamarnu. It's a moitzi. That's it. So that is a super Yerushalayim, we'll say. That's a super Yerushalayim. So therefore, I would have thought that that's at least.
Okay, everybody, let's say Pittel Teller here. We made it till 12:57. We're still short 7 minutes. Ezri Milan, I say Shemayim Ba'aretz. Yitain LaMoitreg Lecha, Yoram Shem Lecha. Yinei Le'anav La'ishan Shem Yisrael. Yinei Shemecha, Yinei Yitzulcha Yad Yiminecha. Yaim HaShemesh Le'akeka V'Yarech Ba'Layla. Yinei Yishmarcha Mikol Ra Yishbez Navshecha. Yinei Yesh V'Teiz V'Echa V'Tav Yad Eilam. Oops. Okay, everybody say, while the rub is off, so first of all, tonight there will be a Chazar Shir at 8 o'clock. Try to make some of these sheets clear. Because we obviously need to see the Rambam inside. We just want to make a quick Chazara here. What happened here today? Lafia Nais Datenu. So the problem here is that the Mechaber seems to be Ma'it Lashon Ben Tam. And Lashon Ben Tam would seem, the Mechaber would seem to tell you that you can't eat donuts because since we're all Yerei Shemaims, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. The Mechaber says Yerei Shemaim and Gimel Yotzei Shneim Loechal El Yadesh Yibarach Alechem Achar Tchila. But the Olam is not miser in this. Why not? We're all Yerei Shemaims. So that's number one. Number two is we seem to have a putative steer in Rebbeinu Tam's. Number three is what is Rebbeinu Tam saying?
Anybody hear me?
Now we hear you loud and clear, but we did not hear anything for the last 3 minutes.
Okay, so I'm just going to make a sikum of those last minutes, which will be a sikum. In order, everybody heard till the Taz, correct? And
we heard the Shverikai. Can you print the Shverikai with Taz because it's frying? It's a shemen. So who says that this is what we have here? Is that what that's what you mean?
Does everyone hear me?
You're talking about the Biur Halacha?
The Biur Halacha. Everyone heard what I said in the Biur Halacha, why the Taz is the Pashtus and the Biur Halacha is the Chiddush.
Yes.
So
you
now
repeat that again. If you don't mind, say that, make a sikum, include that in the sikum, please.
Yeah, I'll make a sikum again. Let's get all the way. In order for the person, the donut Yerushalayim, this is an incredible Yerushalayim, a person that will only eat a donut in the middle of a meal. This man is his mama, she's one of the Lamed Vav Tzadikim came out. Why? Because in order to tell this guy that he can't make a mezainis and an al mechia, you have to tell him, number one, to be chayshish for Rabbeinu Yaina that says these rules are not totally zebezeh and nothing starts. Number two, he's going to say, okay, I'm Yerushalayim, I'll go look what it says in Shulchan Aruch. He looks in Shulchan Aruch and Yeridea, he's going to find that over there that he's pater and challah. And there he's going to say, okay, so if in pater and challah, then about it's only a mezainis and an al mechia. Then we're going to say, no, go read the Shach. And you'll see over there that there is a sheet of Rabbeinu Tam and that you're chayv in challah. Fine. So then,
Okay, but listen, hang on here. We have a minion, barely. I think we have 12, 11, 12, so try to keep us to the minion. Anyway, let me go back to the Sikum here. So the Rav's going to give you the Sikum based on the Beni Yaina, the Rambam, the Beni Tam, and the Birlachas, the Taz, and the Birlacha, and then the Mishabura. And now we were talking about how a Reish Shamayim will not eat a donut only b'say chasuda, which the Ilam is not. In the Ilam, the minig Ilam is lahakol. And because it's not just donuts, everything which is in that category of donuts. Obviously, cake is already possible to kisnin, which we'll have to discuss separately. Notice here, Rabbi Saif, those in the room and those on the Zoom. Next Monday, which is the Chaga.
Did the Sikum come out this time?
Yeah, we're back. Okay.
Let's try one more time. The Sikum, the Ilam got, or still that last part didn't come out?
We heard you.
We heard the Sikum?
I don't know. Did we hear? I'm not sure. So sorry to do this.
I'll do it again.
Do it again.
I'll do it again. So it's like this. The Nakuda, I'll get right to the Taz part because until there, I think everyone did get, correct?
Yes, we got the Rambam. We got the
okay. So now this year Shemayim, this super year Shemayim, he says I'm willing to eat it only in the middle of a meal. But now he says, okay, but 1 minute they fry it in oil. If they fry it in oil, so then it's not any different than a dough that I lushed in oil, that I needed in oil. And such a dough, it's only going to get Berchas Hamazon if I'm kaveh suda on it. That's now the Chiddush, a super year Shemayim. That's the Chiddush in the Bir Halacha over here. He says, no. If you need it in oil and a chanami, but here you didn't need it in oil. And at the shlav of when you finished the dough process, it could have been made into bread. That's it. It gets the same bread and zeo. After you put it into oil, that's after. That's already called the cooking process. I don't care already at the cooking process. I want to know at the point of right before, once you finish the kneading process. That's what I want to know. That's an unbelievable chumrah. Is that clear, Rabbi Say?
Yes.
Now, Rabbi, one more thing I want to say. Now there's a bigger problem here. So now, what's a Yer Shemayim who wants to have a donut? He's a Geshmaka Yer Shemayim, this guy, and he's willing to eat it just during a meal. Okay, but what does he do now? Now, according to the Taz, this thing is not a part of the meal. It's a Pasa Baba Kisnin, which is it's like a dessert, which you have to make a bracha on. So now, according to the Taz, you can't make a bracha. So what kind of, he has to make a bracha because it's not bottled to the lechem. Because it's a cakey type food. So then it doesn't have the shame lechem, and it's a sweet thing. So then, according to the Taz, he has to make a bracha. According to the Mishabura, no. Maybe it's a shame lechem on it. So this guy is such an unbelievable Shemaim. He's going to have to take a piece of bisli and pater it. The only thing I could tell you is that maybe there's a makom to say over here that since when he's eating a donut, he's usually still hungry. Mishabura had said before that we didn't learn yet. But if you eat a cake or something like that in a meal and you're still hungry, then there's no tzad of bracha at all. This is not like the regular kampot shayla. It's something specific about Pasa Baba Kisnin. So this super year Shemayim, if he's a super duper year Shemayim, he doesn't want to get even into that shayla, so then he would eat a bisli or some vada mezainis to patter up his donut in the meal. But that's already a big chiddush. I even wonder if the guy doesn't have that bisli to eat and he's not hungry, he's full, he's just having the dessert as a sweet. I don't know if it's being such a tzaddik to do this, because now he's getting involved in a very big shayla. Maybe it would just be better to have them one donut after the meal, make him a zaynis and an alamechia. Now, I didn't get a chance, because of all the technical difficulties that we had today, to talk about bagels and Yerushalmi kugel, which is Sif Dalet. Should I just leave it for next time?
Please do. They're both very important for us.
Okay, so next time, what I'll probably do is Sif Dalet, Tezvav, and Tezayin. Is that Barak right? The end of Daf Lamed Zayin, or is the Olam ready to go weiter to Lamed Ches?
No. We need a lot of help here. So we want.
Okay,
we want
so
to
very
share
good.
divided too, right? So
okay, very good.
Yudal
Tezvav, Melbatos, all that. I'll send my Mekoimis, and I hope that everything came out clear. It is quite a difficult sugya, and there were technical difficulties. Now, even if donuts are not deep fried, it doesn't matter. What I said would still apply.
Even if they're not to be fried, as long as they're fried, right? There's
As long as they're fried, you would have this cheshbon of the taz
right.
to be makel. So, but I said I
Generally,
could leave
donuts are deep fried. I don't know. The donuts, who knows?
the donuts
Deep
in
fried?
America aren't deep fried, but that is true. But it doesn't make a difference, this. I'll tell you a secret. The way oil works is oil creates like a klipa around the food. So it doesn't matter so much that it's deep fried. Some little bits of oil do seep in, and that's what this machlekes of the Taz and the Mishabur are about. But l'chayra, there's a malka b'mekel. To have one donut, mezaynes al mechia. That's the minhag.
Even Yeresh Shamayim, you're saying, even Yeresh Shamayim.
Yeah, a super duper year.
Super duper Yeresh Shamayim. That's what we are.
Lamed vav, mamish lamed vav, and the top of the lamed vav.
Okay.